Hi there, welcome to another edition of TokStocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds, and today we're lucky enough to have Adrian O'Brien, VP of Business Development and Communications with Midnight Sun Mining. Trades on the TSXV Venture Exchange with the ticker MMA. Man, it's got to be the best ticker on the street there, man.
It's a pretty good one. It's easy to remember, right?
Yeah, it's a great sport. I love mixed martial arts, so there you are. And it sort of feels like that, I would say, from time to time, investing in junior mining.
I think that is fair. Yeah, we've all been through a few MMA scraps in the markets, I'm sure.
Yeah. So anyways, thanks very much for your time. Well, we kind of connected there in November. We found ourselves at the top of a hill in Zurich in Switzerland and at a conference, great conference. And, I walked away and said, wow, this is really a stock I got to own. Bought some and we're up pretty good since then. So thank you very much for that. But as I indicated then, I wanted to get you back for a little bit more of a deeper dive. You have kind of a lot going on with the company, and we only had about 10 or 12 minutes to sort of get through it last time. Yeah. So maybe before we get going on our regularly scheduled programming, why don't we get our 60-second stock pitch out of the way?
Let's do it.
Question number one, it's an easy one. What's the name and stock ticker of your company?
Midnight Sun Mining. It is MMA, as you said a couple of minutes ago. You can always remember that one. MMA on the TSXV.
And what is the mission and vision for Midnight Sun Mining?
So we are working in Zambia. We have a very large project we've been working on for over a decade, and we are looking for transformative copper discovery. I mean, at the end of the day, we're looking for something large. We're not out there looking for little deposits. We're looking for something that is remarkable, is transformative, that it could have a global impact, and we're in the right place. We're in an area that breeds billion-ton deposits. We're absolutely surrounded by majors, and we've got this situation with First Quantum that I know you and I are going to dive into today, that we're working on towards getting some near-term mining happening, and that would result in near-term cash flow for Midnight Sun if we're successful. So it's a pretty unique project. It's kind of a unicorn amongst juniors from that perspective.
Approximately how many shares would be outstanding today?
Approximately 178 million, give or take.
And approximately what would be your market cap?
We were about 150 million. We've drifted a little bit. I think we're sitting at around 120 million today.
And who are some of your major shareholders that you might be able to disclose?
Oh man, major shareholders. We're lucky. We have about 16% institutional holdings. So, that's really comprised of the bigger funds in Canada. So Mackenzie and Cambrian and some of these larger, better known funds. We've been successful in the last 12 months attracting those kind of groups, and changing our share distribution that way. And that's huge. Otherwise, Midnight Sun has historically been very much a retail story. We've been very lucky. We've got a couple of brokers in Vancouver at Canaccord that have stuck with this story from day one and kept us moving through tough markets and tough copper prices. But today we're at a point where we're having a lot of success, and that's attracting an institutional league of investors. And that's huge for us.
Approximately what would be the insider ownership? What percentage?
About 12%.
And are you fully funded for 2025?
We are fully funded for 2025 and probably beyond.
And what would be a couple of short-term catalysts over the next 6 to 12 months, the types of things that we should be watching out for?
There's a number of catalysts coming. So, we did a fairly large-scale program on one of our targets last fall called Kazheba. You and I will end up talking about that a lot today. So we've put out the drill results from Kazheba. They were spectacular. We had 21 meters of 10.5% copper. 26 meters of 5.5%. I mean, just really awesome drill results. And those are going to be pretty major catalysts for us because they really speak to the quality of the targets that we're working on and what the next steps are for Kazheba. So, we've got those coming. Of course, we're working on this project with First Quantum across two of our targets. And we're about to go out and kick off a program at Dumbwa, which is our flagship target. So, you have a lot of work coming up in the next few months. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to be in the field. Once we finish our work at Kazheba, at some point down the road, we'll have a resource and working towards a formal agreement with First Quantum and moving towards what we're doing with them. So, there's a lot to look forward to. It's going to be a busy year for us.
Well, thanks very much. Now we can get back to our regularly scheduled programming. First off, maybe we could talk a bit about yourself. You get over 25 years of experience here in exploration and marketing. Who have you worked with? How'd you get to where you are today?
Oh man, well, I love this one. So I started in the junior resource sector in high school. I got a job with a junior. This was my part-time job in high school. I used to build packages to send them to brokers when I was 16 years old. So I used to sit in the back room of a junior mining company. I'd have, geophysical images and news releases and all of these things in front of me that I could compile into like an investor package. And we would build these packages and do giant mail outs and all of that stuff. I mean, we're talking the days when I had to fax news releases to brokers. That is when I started in the resource sector.
Yeah.
So,
the good old days. I remember some of those. We'd have to build those folders and put everything in and mail them out. I kind of miss them sometimes.
IBECO binding your packages to send out and all of this stuff. It was quite a different time, pre-internet days of doing investor relations. And so, I grew up in the business. I've never left. I've been in the business since I was 16, 17 years old as a part-time job, all the way up. Went into it full-time out of high school and, cut my teeth in investor relations and communications and built my way up to the point where I was president of companies and CEO and built companies and learned to finance companies, developed a nose for projects. And at one point in time, I was a director of the PDAC. So I've had a lot of different roles with a lot of different companies. And, the last group that I worked with was Oxygen Capital. I spent a number of years working with Darren LeBrenz and working with Mark O'Day, both people that I have, the utmost respect for. And I think everybody that I worked with at Oxygen was really ultra professional and very, very good at what they do. So I spent a number of years at Oxygen and then moved on to join Midnight Sun. Of course, I've known Al Fabro for over 20 years. Al's been in the business a long, long time. I'm sure he wouldn't want me to tell you how long, but it's a long time. Somebody yesterday in an interview pointed out something that was a documentary that Al was in the 1980s working as a floor trader at the VSE. So he's been around for a bit. His family's in the business and that. So Al and I have known each other forever. We're good friends. We started working together on Midnight Sun. I joined this team 2 years ago. And for the very reasons we're going to talk about today, I took a look at this copper project and was absolutely blown away. This was something I knew I could work on and I knew that I wanted to work on. So joined this group and we developed an attack plan and we put it in place and it's worked out pretty well the last 2 years.
Yeah. Then in terms of your experience working with Oxygen, that's a top tier group, very much involved in some of the larger sort of exploration, junior mining stories with a view to production. So you would have had quite a bit of experience with that. And Mark O'Day, as you touched on, is real genius with that stuff. So that's some good experience. Right. Anybody else sort of on the team? I see that you guys fairly recently added Kevin Bonnell, who brings some experience with Barrick in the region. Anybody else you want to sort of like speak about him in terms of, adding to the value of the team?
I think everybody obviously on this team is strong at what they do. We've built a really good team and we continue to expand and build the team. And I think that's really important. As you move these projects through different phases, it's really critical that you bring in talent and you surround yourself with people that are very strong in their given realm of what they do. I think the two additions that I think really should be talked about here are a couple of different fronts. Number one is Kevin Bonnell. Kevin is leading the way geologically. He's a fantastic geologist, very specialized with copper in the sub-Saharan African realm, in the Domes region, in Zambia. He lives in Lusaka. As you mentioned, he spent 4 years with Barrick. He led the team that did all the work at Lumwana recently over the last 4 years, which has led to all of the developments there. And if you're not following those, Lumwana is now part of a feasibility study that Barrick is undertaking. To my understanding, they're spending something in the range of $80 million. They're looking to develop a super pit that will take advantage of 2 brand new satellite deposits that were discovered by Kevin and his team. And, we're talking something that would double the production from Lumwana. And when you look at Lumwana, this is a 1 billion ton asset at 0.55% copper. and looking to double that based on this work that they're doing in the new satellite deposits. It's absolutely staggering. So, and then Kevin joined our team on the basis that he sees the same things. He sees the same potential. And in the case of Dumbwa, it is a direct, absolute analog to Lumwana. The mineralization they found there, how they found it, how it's hosted, an absolutely crystal clear analog. So the fact that we have this stamp of approval of Kevin Bonnell stepping up and joining our group to run these projects, and for us to have the advantage of having that much, strength technologically or technically speaking, you have this geological knowledge base in the region that we're working that is unprecedented or unparalleled and really so amazing to have on board. So got Kevin, got his stamp of approval, and away we go.
I noticed you've also got a couple of members from Roxgold, which was a very successful African-based gold developer back from sort of the last major mining cycle that we had.
Yeah. The team, so our team, Bob Sibthorpe and Al Fabro, they founded Roxgold. They made the discovery at Yaramoko. So I think that's a pretty big feather in their cap. It was a big accomplishment. And, certainly Bob is an amazing geologist as well. And Bob and Al have decades and decades of working together. They worked together at Canaccord, they worked together at Yorkton, they ran the natural resource group with Frank Justra. I mean, this is a top tier group of people. And so obviously they have a nose for amazing projects. The other one I think we should mention, that you brought up new people on our team is Margot Noddy. Margot joined our advisory board last year. And to understand who Margot is, she's just an absolutely fantastic fund manager. She was the head of the mining fund for the CPP, Canadian Pension Plan, for a long, long time. Extremely well respected, very well connected. And, she loves the project. She's a big supporter. She's a big cheerleader. But again, going to that strength that we have from her side now, from a financial perspective and a corporate perspective, you surround yourself with people like Margot Noddy, that's going to open doors and certainly put you in an even better position as you move things forward to make the right decisions and execute things properly. So, when you start to look at the two sides, we've got the geological side covered with Kevin and his team. And, obviously from a corporate perspective, we're strong, but now we've brought people like Margot in, and it's pretty incredible to be surrounded by people or with people like this.
Excellent. Well, thanks for touching on that. Now, for viewers of mine that are not familiar with your story, you've obviously been talked about quite a bit here as you've provided a pretty good return since last summer for investors. But for those that maybe are living underneath a rock and haven't heard of the company, would you mind giving us a little bit of an elevator pitch, like we've never heard of it before? What's the company all about? How many projects does it have? Where's it located?
Sure. So we have a 500 and some odd square kilometers, a little over 500 square kilometers, land package located in an area called the Domes region of Zambia. So this is part of the Zambia-Congo copper belt, more specifically the Zambian copper belt, because of course we're on the Zambian side. But this is what I would argue is the top spot on the planet today for copper discovery. And the reason I say that, when you look at this area, obviously it's a hotbed, it's getting a lot of attention. And when you look at the companies that surround us, I always like to say that if you throw a 100-kilometer net over our property, you capture every big player in the copper space, with exception of maybe Glencore. We're talking Barrick, First Quantum, Rio Tinto, BHP, Anglo. BHP is not in the area yet, but of course they're around. You have Ivanhoe's Kamoa-Kakula, 1.4 billion tons at 3% copper right above us. Tenke, that's 122 million tons at 2%. It may not be the biggest, but it is very high grade. That asset sold, I think 50% of it sold for an astronomical number, $3 or $4 billion a number of years ago. Give you an idea of the M&A activity in the region. And so, we have First Quantum's Kansanshi, which is their flagship asset, 6 kilometers away from us on the northeast corner of our property. Of course, we're working with First Quantum. So we are situated, literally surrounded by all of these giant mines, Barrick's Lumwana mine next door. And the common theme amongst all of these deposits and all of these mines is that they're 1 billion tons. This is a region that literally breeds billion-ton deposits. That is a rarity. There's a few jurisdictions in the world where there are billion-ton deposits, but there are little to no other jurisdictions that literally repeat billion-ton deposits over and over and over. And that's what you find in the Zambia-Congo copper belt. So this area called the Domes is about 150 kilometers by 100 kilometers north to south. Very, very unique little jurisdiction that we happen to be situated right smack in the heart of. And we've been working on this project for over 10 years. So we're not new. We've stuck it out through tough times, tough copper prices, tough markets, and we've managed to move this project forward. And now we're at a point where we've gained critical mass. We have funded this project. We have 4 separate targets for a discovery of one of these billion-ton deposits. And essentially, if you look at the projects, they're all situated over these basement domes, which are a geological structure that dictate where those big deposits form. And there's 3 of those domes on our property. And so we have unique geological systems on our property in 4 different locations where we have targets to go after this stuff. So that's exciting. I mean, we have more optionality right off the bat just on that basis. And then taking that a step further, we have oxide copper, which is, the top portion of a sulfide deposit, but it's at surface or near surface on 2 of our properties. And it's very high grade material. We've hit it over and over in drilling. We actually just completed drilling on one of those targets. And as I mentioned, these big intercepts, 10.5% copper, 5.5% copper, really, really impressive intercepts over significant widths. And that is from surface with little to no strip ratio. So this is material that is sitting there and ready to be mined and taken to an SXEW circuit, which luckily we have Kansanshi right next door to us, which has an SXEW circuit. They also have a need for that for that oxide material in order to neutralize sulfuric acid produced by their smelter. And that's what we're looking to do with them. We're looking to build out resources of oxide copper that can easily go to Kansanshi and solve their acid issue. They are low on oxides now. And so they're in a position where it is required to find more source feed, and we're hoping we're that source feed. So it would unlock significant near-term cash flow for us. And on the heels of all of this, we raised $10 million last year through warrant exercise. Despite an aggressive work program we ran last year, we've kept that cash balance at about 10 million. So we're sitting on around 10 million cash today. And we're about to unlock, 2 big areas, Dumbwa and Kazheba, with very aggressive drill programs. So it's going to get exciting in the spring. We're going to be doing a lot of work, and, that gives you at least a starting point, an idea of what Midnight Sun is doing.
In terms of the 500 and some odd square kilometers of ground in the region, are those mostly contiguous projects, which are, sort of all next to each other?
Yeah, they are. It's all one big property block split into 3 licenses. And then within that big property block, it's almost as though you divided it in 4, and each quadrant is a different target with slightly different unique mineralization and the potential to host a billion-ton deposit unto itself.
So you guys have had in one form or another, this sort of project for about a decade. Which of these targets have had past sort of work, like drilling? Do you have any resources?
Yeah, so quite a lot of the project has had work, different levels. What this project has had is enough work to show that the mineralization is there. In some cases, we have mag targets. So we have an airborne survey that was flown over the property. We have geochem. In the case of Dumbwa, we have a 20-kilometer long soil anomaly with a peak value of 0.73% copper. To give you context on that, the average grade of the mines in the region is 0.59. So you're getting 0.73 in soil at surface. That is very impressive. So you have an anomaly that is hitting peak grades that are competing with mines in terms of grade. 20 kilometers long. That's one of the longest and highest grade on record in Zambia. And then over top of that, there's a vegetation kill zone caused by a large sediment-hosted copper system that is essentially poisoning the soil at surface for vegetation to grow in. So you have these barren sections that show that it's there. And then throughout that entire region, there's been quite a bit of drilling. That drilling has hit sulfides repeatedly. So there's been work done on a number of fronts. It's been sampled. It's been drilled. So at Dumbwa, we have an advanced target. That target is ready to be systematically drilled and to start to define extents of the system. So that's what we're going to do this spring, kicking off in probably late April, mid-April, somewhere in that range. As soon as the rainy season ends, we're going to get in there. We're going to run an IP over that target, and we're going to go drilling and finally start to build this thing out and show how big Dumbwa actually is. Then at Me2 has had a fair bit of work as well. We've done, again, there's geophysics, there's geochem, there's some drilling. I mean, we have a 12 meter intercept at Me2 that's 4% copper. And these are stratabound deposits. They tend to be 10 to 15 meters thick, maybe up to 20 meters thick. They're flat lying and you build your tonnage on strike, but they're shallow. And that's the beauty of them. They come with a lower capex. So, the stuff that we've found is consistent. And then at Kazheba, we've actually done quite a bit of work. We've been working on this oxide blanket with First Quantum. We just completed that drilling, as I mentioned, and that produced some fantastic results. So, we're building out new targets at Kazheba. We've done work. We have a theory as to where the sulfide host of that blanket is, that oxide blanket. And now we're going to go back there, do more work, and start to hit those pieces and prove them up and prove critical mass. But what we have at Kazheba is proof of concept. We know the oxide blanket is real. We know it's high grade. And we know we can work on it and build it out. So that's going to be a lot of work going on, Keir.
Great. So just touching on the First Quantum, that's quite a coup. That's quite a nice group to be doing some business with. You've got a kind of a cooperation agreement. What does that sort of mean?
Yeah.
And on which targets? On all targets or just a couple of them?
So the cooperative exploration plan is a loose arrangement. It's a non-binding agreement. And basically what it is pretty simple. If you look at First Quantum's Kansanshi mine, they have 3 circuits. They have a sulfide circuit, a mixed ore circuit, and then they have an SXEW oxide circuit. They have a smelter on site as well, and that smelter produces a lot of sulfuric acid, about 1.2 or 1.3 million tons a year. So what they do is they heap leach copper oxides in order to neutralize and get rid of the acid. It's a really beautiful way of dealing with an environmental liability. But the real beauty in it is that, of course, liberates the copper in the oxides. So not only do they get rid of the acid, but they liberate copper, which becomes cathode copper that they can sell. And they make a lot of money on that, 250 to 400 million a year from what I understand. And so over the last 20 years, they've kept this going. This is what they've been doing, and it's worked beautifully. But they're getting very low on oxide copper now, and they have to be looking to the future at new source feed. Given the proximity of our property, only 6 kilometers away, they have a haul road that runs right through the middle of our property. It only makes sense that oxide copper on our property would be the feed for their property, given that we're not going to build a facility for oxide copper. When you start to look at what we have 2 areas, Kazheba, which is in the northwest corner of our property, and then Me2, which is in the southwest corner of our property, that both have extensive high-grade oxide copper mineralization right at surface that we've hit multiple times. And in the case of Kazheba, this is a transported blanket of mineralization, meaning it came from a sulfide deposit. Let's call it somewhere over here. Maybe paleo channels have moved it. Something has moved it in chunks, in pieces, and transported it into the position it sits today, which is a blanket that's maybe at most 30 or 40 meters thick. And it could literally be scooped out with an excavator, put in a dump truck, and taken to the SXEW circuit at Kansanshi with no processing.
And what would the potential economics look like? Is that like a tolling sort of agreement? Would you get a significant portion of the revenue? Is it really for them just a recycling program to get rid of the neutralizes sulfuric? How would like something like that work?
Well, it's a little early for us to put economics to it. A, we don't have a resource yet, and B, we don't have a formal mining agreement with First Quantum. But what I can tell you is a couple of things. I can give you the economics for them. We know that they make between 250 and 400 million a year from oxides. That's on the basis of running 25,000 tons per day. That's what they run. That's what their oxide circuit is optimized for. But what we also know is that they're running roughly 0.2% copper. So that's the typical grade of their oxide ore that they're running. What we're looking at Kazheba today, based on drilling, is over 1%. So, we've drilled now. We have 17 holes into this thing. We can start to look at average grades. Around that drilling, it's in excess of 1%. Very high grade material. There's enrichment there based on how concentrated it is, acid solubility, et cetera, et cetera. However, the point is that this is very high grade mineralization, and it is far higher grade than what they typically run at at Kansanshi. So what we look to going forward is an arrangement where we're going to share in that cash flow. It's going to be significant. It's going to be probably a minority percentage is our guess, but we have yet to put that formal agreement in place. The next step is to get a resource put together, build out enough tonnage that we're ready to do that, put it out, and get that agreement in place and get material moving to Kansanshi as quickly as possible. That is certainly First Quantum's goal, and that's ours as well. But we know it's going to be significant. And the type of cash flow that we can unlock here is game changing for a company like ours. And more importantly, gives us the funding to go and attack all of those big sulfide targets without having to go to the market and raise a pile of money and issue a pile of shares. So it's a pretty eloquent way to go out and fund the project internally without a lot of unnecessary dilution.
And so this sort of loose sort of agreement covers Kazheba and Me Too. And are you looking to aggressively move both Kazheba and Me Too along to sort of a resource, an MRE, sort of a mineral resource estimate that would help solidify those conversations with them?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the phase right now.
And would you sort of do it both at the same time, or are you sort of focused on, is there one project which is further along?
I think I think Kazheba's first. I mean, we've come along now. We've done a round of drilling. We're ready to go back and do the second round of drilling. So one of the things that we found out from the drilling we just completed is that Kazheba has a clear north-northeast extension. So that north-northeast extension is untouched. We're going to go in there and see what it holds and see how big it is. We do think it will, but time, drill bit tells the story. So we're going to go out, work on the northeast extension. Then we can get an idea of what's actually there. It'll give us a window into what we're looking at. So Kazheba first. The big push towards Kazheba is simply based on proximity to Kansanshi. This is something that's sitting, 6 kilometers away from their mine gate. So it makes sense. It's right on their haul road. It's about 1 kilometer off their haul road. So we'll build a small spur. And otherwise, it's free mining. I mean, you're scooping this up with an excavator and moving it to the mine.
Sure.
You're not crushing it or anything. So this is the kind of material that it doesn't get any easier from a mining perspective.
Sure.
So it makes sense to do that first. And then secondarily, we're going to Dumbwa. So Dumbwa is our biggest target. It's the most advanced target. So we're going to go and attack Dumbwa in Q2. So here in the spring, we're going to put a big program in place. We're looking to spend about $3 or $3.5 million at Dumbwa this year. And it's going to be IP. It's going to be aggressive drilling. And it's going to be the first time that we've ever attacked Dumbwa with a systematic, proper approach to build out critical mass. That is super exciting because that's the target everyone's waiting to see. I would argue that if you look at our share price today, it's probably largely based on this oxide plan. But Dumbwa is one of the best targets out there. It's certainly the best target in the domes right now for a new exploration target. And we own it 100%. We get to go and attack it. If we're successful, the upside is enormous.
Well, let me ask a couple more questions here, and then we'll get into that. It's a nice segue. I'm not quite done on Kazheba. So how much drilling, how many meters of drilling, how many holes have been drilled so far into this oxide target?
So there's 31 historic holes. That was our starting point for Kazheba. So we went in there with 31 historic holes, some really, really nice intercepts. And then we just drilled about 2,100 meters this past fall. So to explain, we get asked a lot, how many of those were into the main zone? The answer is 17. Of the 40 or 50 holes we drilled, what we did is we created a box around the area where that 300 meter footprint, that initial footprint on the 31 holes was. And important to understand, those 31 historic holes were very scattershot. They were all over the place. Some were drilled by First Quantum when they owned the property. Some were drilled by us. Everybody was poking around looking for sulfides. Nobody went in there with a systematic approach focused on the oxides, and it needed to be done. So we built a 50 meter grid around that initial footprint, and we drilled 17 holes in there. Those are the results that were successful that we released, that, now we know we have proof of concept. This thing is real and it's very high grade. Then we drilled holes around it in a 100 meter condemnation shell to try and basically find the constraints. But now the goal is to look at bigger sulfide targets that hosted this thing and the northeast extension, which we did locate with drilling. So that's kind of the idea.
And if I read correctly, you guys are contemplating doing some additional drilling here. You've got again, this is fairly shallow drilling, right? This is RC drilling.
Very shallow.
And so you're contemplating doing some additional drilling in April. How many meters, approximately how many holes do you think that would be?
And more than contemplating. We're putting it all in motion now. So the attack is to drill. We're going to go straight to Kazheba. So we've done IP, we've done ionic leach sampling, we've done our initial drilling. We know where to go. We're going to have some targets to go and attack, both on that oxide blanket and outside of that oxide blanket. And so most of the drilling that we're going to do within the oxide blanket's very shallow, 40 meter max depth. They're vertical holes. They're all RC. So they're quick, they're easy, they're cheap. And then the assaying will be done at First Quantum's Kansanshi mine in their ALS Chemex lab that's on site. So, we won't have the timelines and that kind of thing. Yeah, that's part of the cooperative exploration plan. So they supply geological team. It's pretty handy. It saves a lot of time and money. Yeah, it'd be nice if it was that way for everything, but it's very, very good for this project to move it forward quickly.
Any sort of permitting issues to sort of be able to do that drilling, or is that covered under your existing sort of permitting?
We're ready to rock.
All right, good stuff. Great, good to hear. And so now let's get to where you wanted to talk about. You wanted to talk about Dumbwa. You've got this huge sort of massive sulfide target, 20-kilometer strike length, if I heard you correctly. Now this project, last time we chatted, there was, you had some sort of dealio with Cobalt Metals, which is Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos backed sort of, if I'm not mistaken, they sort of use AI or something in mining exploration. They get a pretty cool jazzy sort of website and stuff like that. But some news, I guess, late last month, they sort of pulled out or backed out of the deal. You guys think it's great news because you get 100% of it back again. But why'd they walk away, and how does that change your plans for the project?
So I think there's a couple big points. First of all, I like to kind of talk a little bit about really when we did the deal. Looking at the position Midnight Sun had been in, we talked about it a few moments ago. Midnight Sun had been in this area, or has been in this area, for over a decade, almost 13 years. And, has worked on this project through the toughest times. We are the longest standing explorer in the area. We picked away at it. We worked on it when copper prices were terrible. Markets were super tough. And, let's wind the clock back and look at the landscape 24 months ago. Okay, 24 months ago, the markets were awful. They were super tough. Nobody was raising money. Companies were dropping like flies, and we were forging our way forward and trying to figure out what to do. And
you're living up to your ticker symbol, grounding and pounding.
Exactly. Scrapping it out with everybody else, and super tough. We've all been through this. As you mentioned, I'm somewhere over the 25-year mark in this business now, and I've seen a few different cycles and markets, and it's tough. You have to have serious intestinal fortitude to fight your way along in this business and not get spooked, and to stay with it. And at the end of the day, Midnight Sun 24 months ago was in a super tough spot. Very low on cash, very little money around to be raised for projects, particularly if they weren't in jurisdictions that people had the ultimate comfort in. And when I say that, I mean, really well-known Canadian or US jurisdictions. South America wasn't getting financed. Africa wasn't getting financed, and not for good reasons. These are fantastic jurisdictions. It's just the sentiment in the market in general was, just wasn't there. And Midnight Sun was basically out of money and needed a deal. And at the time, we strategized that bringing a strategic in to help us fund this project and help us get things moving was probably the best way forward, and probably the only way that we would unlock serious capital. And we ended up in a negotiation with a couple of different groups. Cobalt won that process. They ended up being the group we went with because they did have that marketability. They had Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, this whole thing, and they had an unbelievable geological team. The guy that brought this to the table with Cobalt was David Broughton. We all love Dave. He has, without any question, is one of the top strata copper specialists in the world. He's credited with his team for the discovery of Kamoa-Kakula. He was one of the early geologists that did pre-feasibility work at Kansanshi. Dave is absolutely top tier. He brought the project in, brought Cobalt to the table. He's championed this project for the better part of a decade. Certainly made sense to go and work with that team to get this moving. But Cobalt has, a large valuation. I think they just hit $2.5 billion in valuation. They're working on a project primarily called Mingomba, which is a large asset in Zambia. It's about 200 kilometers east of the Domes region. And basically, I think that their effort, their energy, their money has to be directed towards that asset. They're talking about putting $2.5 billion into it. They're talking about moving it forward towards production. And that means a lack of focus on things like Dumbwa. And Dumbwa at the same time is our flagship. It's our baby. Sure. And if you look at the deal we cut at the time, we gave away 75% of our top asset for $15 million, which at the time was the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, looking at it today, it was heartbreaking to give up that much of our best asset. And when we had the opportunity to get 100% of it back, we jumped on it and we took it and we were happy and excited. And the reality is, we have Kevin Bonnell. Kevin Bonnell is the fellow that unraveled Lumwana for Barrick. He has now put them in position with this big feasibility study and the new super pit that's going to double their production. That was Kevin and his team. And Kevin came to us and Kevin wants to drive it forward. Now Kevin's our chief operating officer and he's driving the ship. It only makes sense for us to have 100% of it if that's a possibility. So we couldn't be happier.
Great. And did Cobalt give you any money to get to keep any of their cash?
They have their entire $2.5 billion valuation and $575 million, I believe, that they just raised. No, there's no compensation. I mean, this is very much a mutual decision.
Sure.
We're all happy to walk away. They need to focus on their thing. We want to focus on ours. There's no hard feelings. They have a fantastic team led by great people, and they're going to do big things. So for us, no compensation needed. For them, of course, no compensation needed. Everybody's happy to go their own direction, and it's an absolute win for both of us.
So originally when your deal was done and they were going to give you $15 million, it was sort of like staged sort of like payments over time?
It was work commitment.
Reach any of that?
No, it was work commitments. So the goal was to spend $15 million in drilling over 4.5 years. Right. And that was at their discretion as long as they did the work over that 4.5 year period. It could be staged out over different tranches. And there was only a very, very small cash component, which because the agreement was never finished, they never did actually reach the point of finalizing that agreement. There was no money changed hands, no feet set foot on the ground, no work was done. The property is in the same position it was in a year ago. So we take it back, we attack it. Those targets are fantastic, but we get to do it on our own. And what that means is all the upside now belongs to us.
Well, that sounds great. Thanks very much for the explanation there. I'm sure you've been asked a gazillion times sort of about it. And nice
topic.
Great. Well, that's good. Well, that's exciting. You've got a big target. So again, this target, you've got soils, you've done a bunch of that work. It's not really ever seen any drilling. It's a sulfide target. So it'd be a much bigger target, much bigger potential tonnage potential, but it'd be obviously sort of deeper, lower grade stuff. It'd be a sulfide versus a high grade oxide, right?
Yeah. So this is you're right. It's a sulfide target. So important to note, all the big mines in the area, all the big deposits are sulfide deposits. They're actually all shallow. None of these deposits are more than 100, 150 meters deep. They're flat lying. So they're easy, open pit. They come with a low capex and they're generally pretty high grade. They're about 0.59% copper average, which for projects like these is actually significantly high grade. So
yeah, very high grade.
Pretty cool deposits, really. They're very unique. And it touches base on a theme that's really key is that when you look globally, I always like to say the low-hanging fruit's been picked. I think I might have said that to you in Zurich when we were chatting.
Yeah.
There are really only a few areas in the world where people aren't chasing porphyry deposits. And because most of the easy porphyries have been picked off now, people are starting to move to lower, deeper, high-grade deposits, but they're so deep. They're 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers underground. They come with enormous capex and capex that most companies would never be able to put together. Sure. And so there's only a few people that could ever even get those projects off the ground. And in most cases, they're talking about block cave models, in which case all of the money is due up front in year one. So there's a whole thesis for those deposits that I simply do not understand. you need to be looking at copper deposits that are shallow and easy and high grade, that come with a lower capex and can actually have a global impact.
Yeah, you got the Techs of the world and Glencores and people like that.
They can tackle it.
Yeah, and if they say, yeah, we think you got a pretty cool project, and they give you a bunch of dough, well, I know one company is sitting there 10 years later, and it's still, there's no decision on whether they're going to go to production or not, and it'll probably be another decade. So it'd be 20 years sort of tie up on a deal where they thought, hey, we got a mine here, and because it's a massive, huge, multi-billion ton porphyry, and they got to wait in line until that company decides that, hey, we need to get something in production. In the meantime, it's just in their portfolio, and it's towards the back of their portfolio, their pipeline. So, yeah, Absolutely. Good stuff. Well, let's turn to scrutinizing some of your financial health and cap table a little bit. So you already touched on earlier on the call here that you'd raised about 10 million, and you guys have been pretty good with your capital. Also, if I'm not mistaken, there's probably some warrants that were exercised, because you did extend some 50-cent warrants that were set to expire last summer. You've extended them to this summer, so I would imagine some of those have started to trickle in. You probably can't say nothing too much about that, but anyways, you're sitting with a nice, healthy sort of cash balance there. When I was looking at your financials, the last disclosed ones, it was just over 8.5 million or something. That wouldn't include any sort of warrants that had sort of come in since then. Since then, your stocks obviously had quite a few days over 50 cents, so hopefully that's sort of come in. But what sort of budget are you looking at, for 2025 in terms of exploration?
So we currently, so treasury-wise, we're sitting on about 10.5 million right now. We're in really good shape. We have had some warrants exercised. We've had some exercised at 33. There are 33-cent warrants attached to the 10 million we raised last May.
Yes, that's right.
20, right? So those are
32-cent unit with a 33-cent warrant, and I passed on it. Idiot I am. But we didn't know each other back then, and
it's the way it goes. Yeah,
it's the way it goes. So, anyways, good deal. Good deal.
Yeah, so we have those warrants. Some of those have been exercised, so that's brought some cash in. We had 40-cent warrants that expired in January. We had a whole bunch of those exercised, and then now we have 50-cent warrants that expire in July 5th. And so those warrants are now starting to be exercised. Actually, quite a few of them have been exercised. There's still maybe 3 or 4 million outstanding. So we expect probably another $2 to $3 million to come in through warrants over the next little while. Most of those 33-cent warrants are extended over 3 years. I mean, they all are, but the ones that are remaining. So we don't expect to see too many of those exercised in the near term. But certainly the 40s that were expired and that were exercised, the 50s are now coming down. It continues to bring money in, and it's kept our treasury up. So even though we went and spent a bunch of money in the field last year, our treasury has stayed very, very healthy, and it's actually higher than it was last year. So we're at about 10.5 million. We expect another 2.5 to 3 to come in. So we have no need to go and raise money. We're in great shape. The programs for this year, it's a twofold attack plan, right? So we're going to go to Kazheba. We're going to do some drilling on oxides. We have some other new targets we're going to go and attack. And simultaneously, we're going to launch this program at Dumbwa, which will consist of basically an IP survey, 16 line kilometers, probably 1 kilometer spacing. That's inexpensive. IP is not an expensive thing to do. But then we're going to go and drill, and we're going to aggressively attack Dumbwa. So, the plan is to spend about $3 million. So $3.5 million. If we replace that with warrants, we should still be sitting at probably close to $10 million. Our burn rate's very low. It's about $60K a month in total. So we're in really good shape.
Excellent. And I was going to ask you a question, but I probably won't because it's a little too early. I was going to ask, will you need to raise again prior to any sort of revenue coming in? But as we've discussed, you have quite a bit of work to do before you'd ever be into that situation to quantify that. So we'll leave that one.
It's interesting you should ask, though, because if we're successful with this plan with First Quantum, their goal is to get material going from Kazheba to Kansanshi in the next 12 months. So
pretty short term.
It's actually pretty short term. We could be in a position. We have a lot of as you said, we do have a lot of milestones to knock off here to get to that point. Obviously a formal agreement. Obviously we have to finish this next round of drilling, but the drilling we're going to carry out in April at Kazheba, is very quick. I mean, this is less than 6 weeks of work. Turnaround on assays will be fast because it's being done at Kansanshi. That's going to push us towards a resource. This is the very expedited timeline on the oxides that we've set forth to attack. That was what First Quantum wanted. That's what they need. That's what we want to accomplish. And so this entire cooperative exploration plan was designed specifically to make this whole process as quick as it can possibly be and as low cost for Midnight Sun as it could possibly be.
Well, so let's ask a different question. We always have to be sort of fair and balanced. It's you've done a very a very good job of talking about all the sort of upside potential. What could go wrong here? What could go wrong with your overall strategy?
You know what? I always like to say that there are certain things we can't control. At the end of the day, you can never eliminate geological risk. You take as many steps in the right direction as you can to de-risk things as you move towards drilling and as you move towards working. And that's the entire process we're undertaking right now. Preliminary work, partial ionic leach sampling, IP surveys, looking at historic geophysical data, looking at historic geochem. What you're looking for is overlapping targets. You're looking for layers of proof that de-risk each target as we go. And so that we can get these targets to a point of, drilling them and moving them forward, or being able to say, okay, that one doesn't require any more focus. Let's put our focus into this better target or whatever it may be. So, what can go wrong? We can't control what the mineralization is at depth. So there's always geological risk. Do we think we have a good shot? We think we have an incredible shot on numerous fronts, whether it's Dumbwa, whether it's Kazheba, whether it's Mitu. And you can't control copper prices. We're going to be, dealing with whatever copper prices come our way. If you believe in the copper thesis, it could be far higher than it is today. And I personally think it will be. And then taking it a step further, you can't really control what else is going on in the world. So, there's lots of interesting developments in the U.S. and the political realm over the last few months has been pretty interesting. So, we don't know what's coming our way on that front, but do we see things that we think are going to be problematic for copper? Quite the opposite, to be honest. We see things that are going to drive copper crazy and lots of demand around AI data centers and things like that. So thesis for copper holds up,
well, you might,
the biggest risks.
You might have, for the first time ever, Zambia might be a lot lower political risk than Canada. So, especially
you're not the
what's
first
going on with that. Especially with the geopolitical stuff going on with the U.S.
Absolutely.
Crazy stuff, but good. Good to, thanks very much for answering that. Good to just keep it sort of fair and balanced.
Sure.
You guys have lots of, potential sort of good things to happen, but always like to know what are those things that, could, they're out of your control, as you indicated. So that's great. Sneaky question for you. Has anybody gone and taken any of your, easy truck and shovel sort of oxide and taken it over to First Quantum and run it through their processor to see how it would work? Because it sounds like it's about 4 times higher grade than what they're currently running.
To our knowledge, nobody has done that.
Okay.
What First Quantum has done is not just doing the assays at their mine. They're actually handling metallurgical work as well.
Okay.
So they're going to get to the bottom of that before we get too far down the road. Based on the history of their mine, is that the recoveries on material that exceeds 0.8% or 0.9 or 1, which is that kind of range we're getting into, your recoveries jump from what they're typically getting at 0.2, which I believe is about 70% recovery, 65 to 70. They jump to over 85. And when you're over 1%, it's like 90% plus recovery. So the economics just kind of keep, levering up to almost unbelievable levels as things go along. So we're going to let them tackle the metallurgy, though. That's a big part of this. And they need those answers before they move ahead. So they need to knock them out.
Well, thanks very much for answering that. That was a nice answer. Most people would have said no comment. So I appreciate that.
For sure.
Let's talk a little, you touched on a little macro talk. You talked about thesis for, copper and perhaps copper prices are pretty good. They're near multi-year highs. It looks like we still have some sticky inflationary sort of stuff related to kind of commodity prices. It looks like there's a little bit of a commodity sort of, resource kind of war going on in terms of now countries are realizing how strategically valuable their own resources are. So, maybe what's your sort of take on sort of copper, how critical it is and sort of the overall sort of thesis?
I don't think the thesis for copper has changed a whole lot. There's two camps. Some people believe that the copper thesis was overblown and that there is less demand than there once was. But I think any argument that can be made around EVs, whether or not, different governments got a little overly ambitious towards EV targets, AI data centers more than make up for that by a mile, and that is not changing. AI data centers are going ahead. They're going to use an insane amount of copper. There will be demand like we've never seen, and most of the reports are still holding up that thesis. So, from our perspective, it's all systems go. We expect higher copper prices and expect it to keep on going, and at the very least, holding up where it is now. So, that's our take on it.
Sure. Any notable sort of copper M&A that you want to talk about? Obviously, that's always one of the factors when you're investing into pre-revenue, pre-mining sort of companies, is that hopefully they prove something up that somebody else wants, or maybe, again, larger companies sort of merge together to create powerhouses and, pricing power and things like that. Any M&A that's sort of happened in the last couple of years that we should pay close attention to?
You know what? Not a ton. There's not a ton. And I think this is a big point, is that it comes back to the same point I made earlier about quality of assets. It's been a while since there's been a big, splashy, new, spectacular copper discovery. And, the last one in the Domes region was probably Kamoa, which is 8 years ago now. Lubway, of course, Kevin's discovery there with his team. But Lubway is part of a bigger system. It's Lumwana. So it's a satellite deposit, part of that thing. And the reality is, in order to drive big M&A in the copper space, there has to be big copper discoveries. And, what was the last big, exciting copper discovery? I mean, there's certainly been a few, but it's time for something new. It's time for something that stokes people's imagination again. And a discovery in one of the big belts. And certainly this is one of the top ones. But I think that's what drives M&A, and it's time for something brand new.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. Adrian, we're going to wrap up here. In one sentence, what should investors sort of take away from this interview?
In one sentence. Way to make it tough, Keir.
All right. I don't know, whatever your final thoughts are. What are some final thoughts? What should we walk away with? What's your sort of, what's your last little elevator pitch for us?
The thesis for copper is strong. The reality is, if you want to look at copper projects globally, you need to look in a jurisdiction where you can actually build these things, where their projects are going to be big enough, have enough critical mass, be high enough grade, and at a low enough capex that they can actually be built. There's only a couple spots on the planet where that is the case. The Domes region of Zambia is probably number one on the planet right now. And there's only a very, very, very few junior explorers that are in the belt. And there's only one that is right in the heart of it that is working on a large-scale project with discoveries in hand and attacking targets like we are. So I think if you're looking for a really exciting copper play, this is it. Like, this checks all the boxes. And that's the reason I joined the group. It's the reason why we're attacking this, the reason why Kevin Bonnell joined us. Things have aligned. Everything has come together. And this is going to be the biggest year for Midnight Sun. So it's going to be exciting times.
And you're known as being a bit of a schmoozer. You work real hard. You're on a lot of these sort of podcasts. You attend your fair share of conferences. Anything that retail investors should sort of like take away from somebody who's kind of an ultimate insider? You talked about it before that, times were tough before for Midnight Sun. They've been a little better. What do you think in terms of kind of junior mining as a whole? I know some people on the uranium side are just absolutely perplexed. They're throwing in the towel. It's over. The thesis is done. selling everything. They're having a bit of a hard time. Any sort of thoughts as somebody who's in there networking, knowing, talking, meeting a lot of these? Any
For
thoughts
sure.
on?
I mean, you pick up different themes, and I think themes are always where I like to put my own investment thesis and what I like to focus on. You got to be in the right metals, and in my mind, gold is a good place to be. Copper is a fantastic place to be. Silver is a good place to be. And those are the three buckets that I would be putting my energy in. When I look at, our projects, I look at Midnight Sun. I'm glad we're in the copper space, but we spent 10 years being in the toughest space that nobody wanted to talk about. So, having the guts and having the determination to stick with these projects in tough times is key. So you want to look at groups that have a track record putting things forth, that have actually accomplished stuff. You want to be in the right jurisdiction. So I'd be looking at, those kind of things. And certainly, African countries are kind of hot right now. Copper is a good place to be. Gold is a good place to be. Those are themes that I like to follow right now, and that certainly we're putting to work in our own projects and our own stuff. But I think that's the key thing. You just have to be in the right place and be in the right commodity.
So that just reminds me, last little comment here. We'll let you get on with your day. Thanks very much for spending some time. You happen to be in Toronto doing a little marketing, so good on you ahead of the onslaught of PDAC next week. So good on you.
Hey, you get the joy of enjoying my Toronto hotel room here. These are not my personal curtains. I'm not rocking the 70s vibe on purpose.
Well, thank you very much for fitting us in while you're in between meetings. But you were at the Indaba conference there in Cape Town in South Africa. It's a big mining conference, kind of rivals the PDAC, but it's over in Africa. What was the mood like there, and what was the response like for you guys?
Unreal. Honestly, it was a real eye-opening experience, I think, for most people that were there this year. You're right in that it's like the PDAC. For anybody that's never attended Indaba, Indaba is coupled up with an investment conference called One-to-One Cape Town. They're back-to-back. But Indaba itself is basically the African equivalent of PDAC. So if you're working on African projects, it is a conference that you need to be at. And you get investors from all over the world, lots of major mining companies, technical service providers, all of that stuff. The mood around Indaba was electric. It was vibrant. You could tell that projects are moving ahead. But again, comes back to my last comment about thesis, about jurisdiction. Where are people focused? What's happening? What's going on? I connected with a lot of friends, a lot of people that run different brokerage firms, funds, institutions. And the theme that kept repeating was they're doing business. They're raising money. They're getting projects move forward. I talked to one group that had just raised 2 very large financings in the last few months, and they were all systems go. And, it's nice to hear your friends having success. It's nice to hear about people doing work. But the vibe there was amazing. And, the buzz around Midnight Sun was real. I took part in something called the Dealmaker's Den, which I don't typically do that kind of stuff. I love the public speaking side, but this was a pitch battle type scenario. And it ended up being chosen the top one. So it was pretty cool to see Midnight Sun at the top of that and taking home the prize in the Dealmaker's Den. Just the buzz around the project. People are really liking what we're doing. But there's other great ones out there too. And certainly so cool to see so much attention coming to those projects and so much buzz, and just to feel, being at a conference where you can feel that energy and that vibe, and people are doing business and projects are moving forward. And that was really cool to see. But you know what? Here we are going into, there's a Red Cloud conference this week, which we'll be partaking in. I think MIF is coming up this week here in Toronto as well. I'm always out here on a fairly regular basis regardless, but I'm here having some meetings this week with different groups and going into PDAC next week. I can't wait to see what the vibe is like. I expect that it'll be similar to Indaba. I think you're going to see a pretty energetic vibe, particularly for those companies that are in the right places, working on the right commodities. And we'll see what it's like, but I have a feeling it's going to be good.
Excellent. Well, Adrian, I won't keep you for a 3-hour Joe Rogan sort of style podcast. We've got an hour. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I used to attend the Indaba conference from time to time, and it's kind of cool to sort of step out of your own sort of your sort of own place in the world and sort of get a different sort of perspective. And
Oh, yeah.
I've seen it both a bit of a feast and a famine in terms of like interest and attention around that sort of conference. So nice to hear about the buzz. Congratulations on your win. And also congratulations on what a formative sort of 2024 and beginning 2025 you have for the company. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to continuing to sort of cover and follow the story. I'm a shareholder and look forward to continuing with that as well and see what you guys do. But
That's great.
yeah, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, same to you, Keir. I really appreciate the invite and being able to participate. This was fun and, hopefully gave you a little bit of a view into some of the things that we're doing and working on and what's coming up and all of that stuff. But it's always great to chat. You and I chat at the different conferences when we're in the right place at the right time. But you know what? It's awesome to sit down and have a little lengthier discussion about all of these things.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, man. I'll let you hop.
Hey, same to you. Thanks, Keir. Take care.